Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 119 of the CUInsight Experience. This episode is brought to you by CUIs, the leading talent development provider to the credit union industry and longtime friends of CUInsight.com. So I have an ask. After you're done listening to this episode, head on over and check out the CUIs podcast on CUmanagement.com. It's great content from thought leaders inside and outside of credit unions, and it is one that you will not want to miss. My name is Randy Smith. I am one of the co-founders of CUinsight.com, and I'm lucky enough to have conversations with the amazing people who make credit unions great, and I get to bring them all to you. I pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is David Miller. David is the co-founder of CUinsight.com. Yes, this CUinsight.com. He is my business partner, and I was so excited to have him on today. And I'm telling you, this was a blast for me. When I pitched the idea to Dave about coming on the podcast, it was the idea to basically record one of the thousands of conversations that him and I have had over the years. We talked about where CUinsight came from and what has us excited about the future. We shared a bunch of those leadership lessons and hacks that we've picked up over the years of bringing CUinsight.com to all of you. Of course, we wrapped it up with a little bit of fun with the rapid fire questions to get to know Dave better. I think there may be a few surprises that come from this one, like maybe how long Dave and I have actually known each other. So without further ado, I give you my conversation with David Miller. Enjoy. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, Randy, great to be here.
This is going to be so much fun. You know, this idea came to me. You and I were talking last week after being on a partner of ours had me on their podcast, the CRM Next podcast recently. And it was a blast kind of telling the CUinsight story. And I realized that that's not something we've done on the CUinsight Experience, our own podcast, which is not surprising between you and I over the past 13 years. But I figured who better to come on and tell the CUinsight story than you, the co-founder and my partner in crime for the last 13 years. So this will be a blast. Thanks for doing it on short notice also. Put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. You know, it's been a long time coming. I think this will be, like you said, a lot of fun. I'm ready.
So, you know, I just kind of mentioned it. One of the things that you and I have joked about for years is that we do a terrible job of talking about in marketing CUinsight. So we really have focused on the credit union community and our partners and maybe aren't the best at telling our own story. So we're changing that up today. I think it'll be fun. We can share some lessons that we've learned along the way and let people behind the curtain of CUinsight. I'll start with this question to you. What are you most proud of? You know, we're coming up on 13 years of doing this fun ride. What are you most proud of where we are today from where we started, you know, sitting at our dining room tables?
Sure, that's a great question. It's funny you mentioned sitting at our dining room tables. That's exactly where it started. Both of us with a couple ideas and a couple computers and an internet connection, and away we go. What I think we've really done a great job of is creating a presence in the community. I think what we've tried to do is really become a part of that credit union community, that culture. We embrace it. We love everything credit unions are about. And I think that's why we've become a good fit for credit unions and those that affiliate with credit unions. It's interesting that we've been doing this for a long time. And when we talk to people, I know you talk to a lot of people. I get the opportunity to talk with people as well. And a lot of them think it was an overnight success, right?
Right.
They say, wow, you guys, you're just here and that's great. And I try to tell them this has been 13, 14 years now in the making, and it's taken a lot of dedication, a lot of hard work, but we're happy to be here, and hopefully there's many more years to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a question that they asked on that podcast about like the rapid adoption. And I'm like, boy, there were some starts and stops in the beginning. And there was all kind, like different ideas that we tried. We always talked about throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what stuck. Luckily, a few things have, right? So,
yeah.
But yeah, no, that is true. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, when you, from that, let's call it the blimp level look, like what value are you most proud of that we bring to the credit union community that, like you mentioned, we both love being a part of this community?
I think the word community is really what it's all about. Sense of community. In our personal lives, we both do a lot to give back to our local community, to our international community, our national community, our regional community, just whatever you're involved in. And I think if you want a great community, you have to be a part of it. You can't just sit back and hope that others make your community better. So I think that's something I'm really proud of, that we've been able to take what we believe in, which is supporting others and helping others as best we can, and finding a community that agrees with that and allowed us to build a business that can help support them.
Yeah. When we first started this little boat show, the idea that we've been able to create a space where so many people can find that community and have their voice heard and, kind of connect together, I think it's one of those things that excites me and has me excited too for what we can do going forward, right? And we'll talk about that more coming up here. One spot that I wanted to touch on, because I know it was kind of a cool experience for both of us and we did it at different times, but it was becoming DEs through the National Credit Union Foundation, longtime partner of ours. And something they wanted us to do for years, but when it was basically just two of us trying to do everything at CUInsight, we didn't have a lot of time to take that chunk of time away, right? But, why was that important for you? I know you and I have talked a lot about after going through it, that it really kind of helped connect the dots of what we were doing. I mean, your thoughts on that?
I think connecting the dots is a good way to put it. I also think opening our eyes, maybe. Both of us have been in the credit union environment in the community, but we've never worked for a credit union. So we were never on the inside. We've kind of maybe were outsiders. And going to the DE program, as much as I thought I knew about credit unions, it really was eye-opening. We spent a whole week, at least my training session was a week long, right? I think yours was too. And it was full immersion. It was great. We did a lot of exercises, met a lot of passionate people in the industry, and it just really opened my eyes and made me feel welcome that I'm in the right place. This is where I need to be. These people have the same values that I do, and maybe we can all make a difference in someone's lives. So yeah, it was an eye-opening experience for me, to say the least.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. What has you most excited? We, a few months back, sat down with Lauren and the entire team and did our strategic planning. So, as we're looking forward, the next year, three, maybe go a little bit down the road, even 3 to 5 years, what has you most excited about CUInsight and what's to come for CUInsight.com?
I think the biggest thing would probably be growth. I think we have a lot of room or a lot of potential for growth. There's so many opportunities out there right now that we can fill. There's so many voids that we can fill, or that we're thinking we can fill. I think we have a lot of great projects on the horizon, and the next 3 to 5 years, wow, without specifically saying a project we're working on now, I think the credit union community will be pleasantly surprised with some of the products and services that we start to roll out in the next 12 months even.
Yeah. When we were doing the planning, one of the things that I appreciated and was thinking back on after the fact was how so much of the conversation about that growth, and I think what you just said right now was about kind of keeping to our core of wanting to connect people. And it was okay, in this digital world we live in, the same kind of questions we asked ourselves when we were starting this thing is to start to look at that again. And we kept coming back to how do we connect folks in 2022 and beyond instead of 2012. So that to me is, it is exciting to think about how we can grow and what that looks like. I did not send you this question, but I know it's one that you and I have had a lot of talks about. It's something that comes up often when I'm talking to CEOs and leaders of credit unions on the podcast is, when you're focusing on growth, you also have to look at what to get rid of, because you only have so much space, right? And so much bandwidth. So what worked and what made CUInsight a decade ago? Any hacks, I guess, over the years that you've come up with where not only to look at what to add, but is there that time to subtract also, I guess, because that's a big part of leadership, right?
Yeah, I think there's always a time to subtract. It's just, what do you subtract, right?
Right.
So one thing we've gotten really good at is identifying what's working, what our viewers and subscribers want, and focusing on that. So if we listen to what people are telling us, provide them what they want, maybe a service they wanted last year, they don't want anymore. So I think it's gotten easier over time to remove some of these services and products that aren't as useful as they once were, and implementing the new products that we hear that they want right now.
I'm going to go down a total rabbit hole here, so I hope I don't bore people on this, but it's not no surprise to you whatsoever. But one of the, I think over the past few years, and I will say this, it was even when you and I individually, we sat down with Jill, in Humanity and taking a look at she really had us focus on what our vision for CUInsight was and what our goals were and what that core value that we had was. And to me, that was an important time. It obviously led to Lauren and the team that we have today, which has been great for us. But I don't want to say more importantly, but another important part that came out of that was I think one of the things where we found success early on with CUInsight is we weren't trying to just do the same thing all over. We weren't trying to do it the same way everybody was doing it. And I would think with any business, credit union, when you have success getting to a certain point, you and I used to talk about that it was very easy to turn our ship because we were a little ship,
Yes.
As we've grown, it's a bigger ship. There's a little more pieces to turn. So I think what you were talking about there, and maybe it's something you can expand on a little bit, is that idea of still keeping things fresh, what works for today, what works for our readers and our community today, but also not kind of holding on to that legacy stuff, even though it was a important part of getting us to where we are today. I feel quite honestly like we're doing a better job of that recently, after maybe we got away from it for a while as well, and didn't have the growth that we're both so excited for of what we know is to come. It's not like we ever stopped growing, but we kind of were doing the same thing for a while.
I think it's important to continually evolve. And as you mentioned, it's harder to turn your ship around if you're a large organization. And we've always been a fairly manageable size, and we could turn the ship. One thing that maybe hindered us, and I think we're past that now, is for the longest time, it was you and I, and we'd bring some people on board, and they've been great employees, and we've been rocking ever since. But with you and I, let's just say in the weeds, we're so involved in the day-to-day that maybe we didn't see that the ship needed to be turned, or maybe we didn't see when the ship needed to be turned, or we might have just been late. So bringing Lauren on board to kind of be the captain, so to say, I think has been great. And she's done a wonderful job of cohesively pulling the team together and making sure our ship gets to its final destination.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It's interesting you say that. You and I'm going to let people behind the curtain little bit, but I don't think it'll surprise anyone out there, is this idea that you and I, we're entrepreneurs. We love the strategic thinking and the planning. And at times, us getting into the weeds is not necessarily our sweet spot a lot of the times. So what you were saying about making that decision, which was a big decision for us to bring on a captain, to bring on a CEO and a publisher that we'd never had before. It was you and I, and to take a more strategic role and supporting role in the day-to-day operations, I think it's 2 years in, it's worked out really well. But right. And I think you can tell in your voice, I know you can tell in mine, how excited it makes us for the possibilities and the opportunities that we have going forward. And it's good stuff there. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, my guess is, that are looking at their credit union today and saying, wow, we did things a lot differently over the past year and a half than we had for the previous 75 years. Now, how do we move forward with that? And I think that's a question that I've been asking all year to people, is that idea of you're doing new stuff. Is there anything that needs to go away? Right? Is it just to keep doing stuff better? But hey, so I'm a big fan, and this is a term that something I read on or heard on a podcast, a year or so ago, but it kind of stuck with me, and that that idea of believing that we are shaped by those people who we tend to have around us. So, who does Dave surround himself with, and how have they helped you in your career?
That's a great question. It tends to not really be one person. I think I've mentioned in our podcast so far that I like to do a lot of community volunteering, giving back, civic duties, I guess we can call it. And the people I associate myself with are typically small business owners or people that work for companies that are very supportive of my local community. And we do a lot of volunteering. So these people aren't necessarily rock star famous people, but they have the same values as I do. And it's not just about business and how can I make a whole lot of money or how can I make another dollar. It is, what can I do with the resources I have? Maybe I work for a big company, and how can my company help the community in large or at large? And I think those people tend to really round out my sense of belonging of who I am. I think it's your average everyday Joe that really influences me.
You talked about sharing values with the people that you like to surround yourself with, and you've mentioned values, multiple times already. When you're talking even about CUInsight, the sense of community. How do you make sure personally and professionally that you're staying true to that purpose? Because it's often we can get distracted, at times. Yeah. And I mean, you and I know it. It's not tough to find purpose in credit unions and the community we get to work with. So yeah, I mean, how do you make sure that you're still living the values driven life? And how do you believe that benefits CUInsight as an organization and the greater credit union community that we serve?
I think our company, CUInsight, has really always been about, it has always been about supporting credit unions and just helping however we can. So by helping in my community, I feel that makes me a better person. Number one, it just gives me a sense of satisfaction. And I like to bring that to work. It's hard sometimes to separate work and life, but if you can intertwine those two, I think that's pretty helpful. And that's not always an easy thing to do, right? Sometimes your workload may be 110%, and you just feel like you're up to your eyeballs in work. But what I've learned as I've gotten older, I guess, is that I can schedule things a little better, and it's okay to take some time off. If I need to take some time off to focus on Dave and the family and just mental well-being, that's okay. Go ahead, take some time off, recharge, so to say, unplug, let work go for a little bit. We have such a great team now that you and I can step back for a little bit and the ship keeps on going.
Absolutely.
So I think that's really been beneficial for us.
Yeah. So you and I were just talking over the weekend, actually. Your oldest is now driving. So you talk about us getting older. Your youngest is now driving, right? Your oldest is in college. I mean, that's, I don't know how we got this old. This is it's crazy. So, yeah, what happened there? Okay, this was a question that they asked me on the other podcast. When I first saw it, I was kind of like, But in the conversation, I actually found it to be a fun question to think about. Is there a failure that we've had that you believe that we like? I'm kind of expanding on their question, but that question was around that idea of failure that we've had to overcome. But I'm going to spin it a little more that when you think back about that failure, that thing that didn't work for us, that we learned from, and it really made us a better company after we got past it.
Wow. To pick out one, I guess would be kind of difficult. So, I'm not too proud at this point in our careers or at this point in CUInsight's life to say that we've tried some things and they didn't work. And I think what we've learned from that is that we need to try things. We need to try things that we perceive the market is ready for. And sometimes the market's not ready. Sometimes the market doesn't want what we have, right?
Right.
And if we learn from that and we learn how to fail quickly and as inexpensively as possible, I think that helps a lot. Rather than keep pouring time and money and effort into a project that isn't producing the results you're expecting, sometimes you have to know when to hang it up and move on, try something new. And I think we've gotten really good at that.
Know when to fold them, right?
Know when to fold them,
yeah. I couldn't agree more on that. And it's something that when I think back through some of the stumbles or some of the ideas that didn't really work, but that we grew from, one of the things that I really in my mind keep coming back to, and I thought about it after I asked this question, so I didn't even say it on the other podcast, was you mentioned time, and you mentioned, hopefully not losing a lot of money or resources on it as well, but the personal investment that, and not from a money standpoint, but that mental investment of trying to make something work that maybe isn't working takes away from, I'm thinking of a couple things in particular where it took away from the core of what we were doing well, because we were spending so much time on conversation trying to figure out why something we thought was amazing wasn't working as great, right?
Right. And that can be a lot of negative conversation, right? So you're focused on talking about, why is this thing failing? It should be working. And in the whole scheme of thing, you have all these other successful projects going on that you need to keep rolling. And sometimes that failing project can bring you down. So yeah, it is hard to get over that, I think.
And I think it is that learning experience that we've had over time. But like when we do cut the cord on something and let it go, it's so funny. And maybe that's a testament to you and I, is like we just move on from it. And it seems like the conversation just gets looser again, to the point where we're just excited about the future again, right?
It's really a relief. Like the weight is off your shoulders and you're free to get back to doing what you were doing that was working.
Absolutely. Now let's go back to the positive. I know we like to talk about that. What's one of those successes that you're most proud of at CUInsight?
I think the biggest one is always going to come back to people. I think we've surrounded ourselves with a great audience and a great team. The team we have is really very cohesive, well put together. Everybody knows what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And more importantly, they collaborate with each other. We don't have any silos at this point. I feel like everyone is very much in unity right now.
Yeah, it's been great to see watching them, because it's been something that our hands haven't been all over, the mini cons, the past year or so, and to watch how well and the ownership they take in it and how well they all work together. And boy, the team just seems to be growing too. So it's exciting, exciting times. A big picture question that I've asked on the show for 3 years now. Is there something you believe credit unions need to do differently, or maybe just to put it a different way, better, to maintain relevance? There is a lot of change and a lot of innovation going on all around us.
I think innovation might be the key word there. Fintech is just one thing that is taking over the world, right? You have these companies that are not banks, they're not credit unions, yet they offer financial services. And I think credit unions will adapt to that environment. It's a question of how are they going to adapt. I think some credit unions will partner with fintech companies, and other credit unions may have the resources to create their own fintech type services and products. And I think the consumers nowadays are more demanding than they ever have been, right? Everybody wants everything right now. And if we keep doing things traditionally, well, you may lose some of your members.
Jill and I were talking over the weekend. We had let's just call it, very slow experience at breakfast. And they're short people. You're patient and understand there's a labor shortage, but that service that you've kind of come to expect from a place, when we were walking home, I was like, I'm not mad or disappointed or anything. I understand there's a labor shortage everywhere. They only had 3 people working where they probably should have had 6, right? But does it stop us from going back next Sunday? Like, do we wait till they go back up? They staff back up or something. And it could be the opposite thing that business needs, right? But you're just like, it was a 2.5 hour breakfast. So for some eggs. But anyways, I'd like to move on to your career journey. This was a question I've added this year. That's kind of been a fun one, is, do you remember that moment? Because I guarantee none of us grew up going, someday I want to work in credit unions when we were young kids, right? So do you remember that moment where in your career you were like, credit unions, this might be my spot? What did a young David Miller want to be while he was growing up? Was it the next Tony Hawk, or was it what would you want to be?
That's an interesting question. I think this will be a fun answer. You're right. I am just like every other statistic. I had no intentions of working in the credit union movement. It just wasn't a thought. And as far as being Tony Hawk now, I mean, I was the typical 14, 15-year-old skateboarder, right? But that didn't quite pan out for me. So what happened was I ended up working for, over years and years, I had done technology consulting, and I had done a few credit unions here and there, but they were very short-term engagements. And typically I was brought in as just a consultant to come in for a 2-3 day project and present my findings and results and move on. And once I went to a firm that was entrenched in the credit union community, doing information security audits, that really opened up my eyes. It showed me that, wow, these people, the people that work for the credit unions, are just like me. I may not work for a credit union, but outside of work, we do a lot of community hours. We try to help out however we can. So traveling the country, visiting credit unions, I think that gave me the desire to really stay in the credit union community. And that's been 20 plus years now. And I really can't imagine being anywhere else.
Do you remember that early inspiration for CUInsight? And I'll add this on top of that. I just thought about this when you were talking about having that moment, because for some reason what popped into my head was the moment when I remember I either called you or sent you an email, and because we were working on CUInsight was kind of a side hustle like in the evenings for us, and I was like, I'm all done with the other thing. I'm just doing CUInsight. That's it. I'm like, I think we got something here. Let's quit the job, quit the day job. And I'm like, let's focus here. And if I remember correctly, it was a few months you had more family at home and had to be a little more responsible. But a few months later, you were like, me too, let's do it. So
we're all in.
Yeah, we're both all in.
One inspiration, one moment, I do remember seeing emails from you about that. I just remember thinking in general, the whole time we were doing this as a side hustle, that there has to be a better way for credit unions and vendors to connect with each other. There's a lot of great ideas out there and a lot of people with the same values that want to connect. How can they do that? How can we provide this pertinent information to our audience? And I just remember from that high level thinking, this is something we need to make work. And I think once you were on board full time, that was when it finally dawned on me that, man, if I come on full time too, we can really make this happen. So yeah, that was a great experience. Exciting times for sure.
It sure was. I've told, I'm sure you have it often as well, as like when people are going off on their own, they'll come to you and say, okay, you went off on your own at some point and started a business, and one of the things that I always tell people is like the first 3 years, you are going to work harder than you ever have in your life. It's just eat, breathe, sleep. But when I look back on it, I remember year 2 of CUInsight as being one of my favorite years. It was like where we actually could buy macaroni and cheese. And it was that, to me, that was like where it was like, wow, this might actually work, right? Not only just be a fun project, but be a career. It makes me smile. I think back to, and one thing I want to throw out there to people, because I'm not sure if it's ever been mentioned on the podcast, I feel like we were very fortunate with our timing as well. I've told people in the past, when we started CUInsight, things like the Huffington Post and the Drudge Report were 6 months old. It was just a different time in digital media. And we happened to be, I would say, we had some great resources to look at and follow and see what they were doing on a national level and figure out how we could bring it to credit unions. So has the inspiration changed at all, over the past 12, 13 years, 13, 14 years, whatever we're going on now?
It's been a long time. Yeah. I don't know if our inspiration has changed. I think our mission really is still the same. I think we've come upon, or we've evolved to deliver our products and services in better ways. And by that, I mean, like you mentioned in the very beginning, that what we were doing in 2008, 9, and 10, even up to 12, that doesn't necessarily work for today's audience, right? People want to consume information differently. And I think we find ways to meet their needs.
Is there something, they're all going to probably laugh at this one, and I pretty much had a good idea of what you were going to say here, but is there something the team has heard you say so many times, like I can finish your sentence, or they're just like, yeah, we know her, Davis?
Oh, that one is so easy. I'm not sure if everybody knows, and maybe this would be a good time, but we're a virtual office, and we have been for quite a time. So one of the things that comes along with that is you need a central mail repository, right? You can't have everything being sent to everybody's house. So I think what everybody would say is, that I say is, oh, I'll have to check the mailbox, or
yes, yep.
Where's Dave? Oh, I think he's at the mailbox. And
if you're not on Slack, we just assume you're at the mailbox.
Right. If I'm not on Slack, I'm at the mailbox.
That's so true. It's interesting. You talked about us being completely from a virtual standpoint. We started in our dining room tables, and then we grew into office space for a few years and had a central location in Greenville, South Carolina. And then It's probably been, 4 years now, maybe, or so?
Right around there, yeah.
Yeah, we made the decision to go back to being a completely remote workforce, which in turn turned out pretty well when the whole world had to go to that, since we were already used to it and had all the tools in place. So a lot of credit unions out there and a lot of businesses out there, the vendors that support the credit unions are, I guess you could say at this point, I don't know if it's struggling with, but they're trying to figure out what that long-term remote work or quasi-remote with some time in office, but more flexibility for employees to be able to work from home. Any tips or hacks or things to be aware of that, for somebody who's been doing it for quite some time?
I think every job position, not every credit union, but every job position will have its unique requirements. I think there are always going to be some services that your member wants to come in and actually see somebody face to face. But as far as productivity, I think you can be just as productive by having a remote office. I don't think that's hindered us in any way. Our team is very cohesive, like I mentioned earlier, and the ball doesn't seem to get dropped. We're all doing very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a myth about being a great leader that you just think is dead wrong?
I used to hear it when I was younger and really trying to climb the corporate ladder, and that was a good leader is the first one in the office and the last one out. And, I don't know if that was ever good advice, really, honestly. I don't think the quality of work is measured by the amount of time you're sitting in the office, right? So you could come into work at 5 a.m. and leave at midnight, but what did you accomplish? Maybe you sent an email or maybe, I don't know. So yeah, I'd like to get rid of that. I'd like to say a good leader is not the first one in the office and not the last one out.
That leads to the next question. Outside of credit unions, what does Dave do to recharge? What does that work-life integration look like to you?
Sure. Well, I definitely try to find time to unplug. And I think being physically active and physically healthy really helps the mind. I think it gives you a little more maybe mental acuity. So I try to do a lot of mountain bike riding all over the country, take the bicycle out wherever we go. That's kind of an independent thing that I do on my own for Dave time. But as you mentioned, I do have a family and we live in Florida. So we like to take the boat out, go scuba diving, go fishing. Sometimes we just go out and drive around so we can feel the salt air blowing in our face. It's tons of fun.
Oh, yeah, you're down in Florida. So that's when I lived down there, I was at the next to the ocean all the time too. So it wouldn't be the CUInsight Experience podcast without some rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid, but your answers don't have to be. Was there something that you said no to that you're sure glad you did in hindsight? Because, life might have changed. Opportunities might not have existed.
Sure. I think a good one that may pertain to a lot of people, and it's not necessarily work related, is that there are a lot of good charities out there that you can donate your time to. And you can also donate your money, but sometimes your time is more valuable than money. And what's happened to me in the past, and I tried to learn from it, is that you get involved with one charity, and then before you know it, it's 2, and then it's 5 and 10. And all of a sudden you're oversubscribed and you really can't be as effective as you might like to be. So what I try to tell people now who are just starting to get into civic activities is pick 1 or 2 that really interest you now. Those other ones will still be there. So help out for a couple of years now, rotate off and join the others next time.
It's good advice. Has there been a recent purchase that you didn't know you needed, but now you can't imagine living without? I mean, it seemed like over the pandemic, everybody bought Pelotons and puppies, right? So.
I think you're right on that, but I am such a boring and frugal guy that I don't buy anything spur of the moment. There is not one spur of the moment purchase I can think of. I tend to over research. I don't know. So no, during the COVID period, I really haven't gone out and just spent money to spend money.
I think for about 2 of our holiday parties in a row, we were ganging up on you to try to get you Rhonda a new kitchen. I think it took a couple of years, but I know you guys have it. You got a new kitchen, so
it did. We had to research that quite a bit. Yeah, our old kitchen was fully functional, right? I didn't see a reason to let it go.
I do think that was multiple holiday party conversations. So you mentioned earlier growing up. What were you like in high school? And is there any memorable trouble that you got into that you can share? I mean, can you meet Diana Dykstra's Grand Theft Auto from high school?
I don't think I can meet Grand Theft Auto. No.
I'm not sure anybody has. So.
High school was a really long time ago. And
we're old.
I know, we're getting old now.
And for those of you who don't know, Dave and I are actually first cousins, and I'm 6 months older, so I can make fun of him about being old, but yet I'm still the older guy.
That's right. I'm the young one here. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big surprise to a lot of people.
I think it will be too.
A lot of people know that. Yeah.
It's always been funny at conferences when people are like, so how did you and Dave meet? And I was like, or how long have you and Dave known each other? I'm like, since he was born, basically. So yeah,
I think you were there. I think you were there my first day I came home. Yeah. So back to high school. Yeah, I don't remember trouble. I didn't steal cars. What I do remember is not really hanging out with a clique of people. I was just as much friends with the folks that played sports, the band kids, and everybody in between. And I think a lot of that is carried on with me today. And I'm friends with pretty much everybody I meet now.
Yeah, cool. What are you reading? Or what's that book that you think everyone should read or that you've gifted?
Well, let's see. I'm always reading something. So 2 interesting ones that really come to mind are, as you know, and I don't know if anybody else knows, but I really like technology. And whenever Bill Gates puts something out, I tend to read it just to see what it's about. And he's got a book out now that's not necessarily about his technology, but it's about climate change. How to Avoid a Climate Disaster is the name of that.
I have not picked that one
you
up
have
yet.
That one?
No, I don't. Actually. I'm sitting here staring at a bookshelf going, that's not on there yet. So you're adding to my list.
What's interesting is, do I think I can personally change, I don't know, climate issues right now? No, but it's nice to read about and learn about, and maybe I can have a little part in helping make this world a better place. One other book I'm reading that I think a lot of people will like to read is a book by Adam Grant.
Yeah.
And it's called Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. And if someone would have told me that phrase 15 years ago, I'd have been so thankful, because when you're younger, you feel like I can just make anything work. I know everything. And then as you mature and you get older and you've had more experience with things you didn't know about, it just opens your eyes. And this book would have been a great thing to read 15 years ago. But for now, Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. Great book to read now.
I love it. I'm an Adam Grant fan. I can actually,
good.
I see originals on the bookshelf right in front of me, to tell you the truth. So,
good.
But that one I haven't picked up yet. I'll have to get that too. Jeez, you're adding all kinds of books to my reading list. So the random question, what's the greatest album of all time? That one you could listen to from front to back, or for guys our age, I'm like, when the songs come on the radio in the car, you turn it up still to this day, right? Embarrass the kids.
I am a product of the 80s and think that would be very telling, right? So there's a lot of artists that I could pick out, but I think one that's not from my genre that maybe has influenced my life more than ever isn't so much an album, but an artist. Johnny Cash was just a very rebellious, spirited person. And I think some of those ideas he had about doing things his way may have stuck with me. And maybe that's why I became an entrepreneur, that I like to find out what works and try to find a way to make things happen. You can't do that if you're following the status quo, right? You have to be a mover and a shaker.
I still like Johnny Cash because I remember listening to it in my dad's car, like up in Alpena. So, that's funny. That's good stuff. And Willie Nelson, the same, quite honestly.
Willie Nelson, yeah.
From my youth, before I got into Metallica and Guns N' Roses and everything else, right?
It's funny, when you first asked me that a minute ago, that one of the first bands I was thinking of is Guns N' Roses and Metallica.
Appetite for Destruction is the greatest album of all time. I mean, it's just front to back. There's not a bad song, still to this day. So, when you hear the word success, who is the first person that comes to mind and why?
I think that changes over time. and it's not usually the famous, glamorous people. I try to look around me and find people that I feel are successful. So one year it could be somebody, next year it could be somebody else. And it's not always defined by money. I don't think money should be your driving factor in life. I think you need to live a fulfilled life. And part of that is giving back. And like we've talked about, making your community a better place for everyone. And with this pandemic going on right now, as you know, my wife Rhonda is in the healthcare field, and the pandemic's been pretty trying, and it's presented difficult times for everyone, especially those that are working in the industry and taking care of those affected with COVID. And Rhonda gets up every morning willing and ready to give 100%, and she just goes at it. And that's really some inspiration for me. It gives me motivation that if she can get up and save the world, at least I can do is get up and make CUInsight and the credit union community a better place.
Shout out to Rhonda. Well done, sir. Well done. I second that. That's awesome. Well, Dave, thanks so much for being on the show and taking the time. Question I have for you is any final thoughts to share with our listeners or asks of them today? I'll add one for you so we don't get in trouble from Lauren. Is everybody should go out and sign up for MiniCon. We are excited about that,
perfect.
Right?
Yeah,
We've got
sign up for MiniCon.
A couple more this year, and I mean, boy, we're up to I think 1,000 people showing up for those things now. So that is an exciting way to connect, folks. That is for sure. So I'm going to steal your answer from you right there.
That's good. I like that. Good job.
Thanks again, Dave. We'll link to everything we talked about in the show notes. You added to my book list. That's fun. If people have more questions of you, or they want to pick your brain, what's your poison? Email, Twitter, LinkedIn?
I love email. I'm a big fan of that. So email me anytime, dmiller@CUInsight.com.
We will put that in there as well. Dave, thank you again. Have an amazing day and be well, sir.
Thanks a lot, Randy. Great talk.
Before we go, I would like to take a moment to thank all of you for being you and listening today. And once again, thank you to Dave for taking the time out of his day to come on the show and share those lessons and hacks with all of us, what he's picked up over his career. Hopefully this conversation can help others. So, and a big thank you to our sponsor, CUIs. As I mentioned at the start of the show, make sure you subscribe to their podcast over on CUmanagement.com as well. It is one of my favorites and one that I do not miss. A couple more things before I let you go. Don't forget to subscribe to the CUInsight Experience podcast on all your favorite podcast players: Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're there. And check out the CUInsight Experience podcast book list to find your next read. Dave added a couple to mine on this show. Thank you all again for listening. I hope you have a great day and be well, friends.